Welcome, everybody, to a Thirsty Thursday edition of The Sweat presented by DraftKings. It is damn good to have you guys and gals here with us for the next 55 minutes or so. Jesse Cofield, Emerson Lancia. The Sweet 16 is also here, and that has us feeling feelings.
Yes, and after we tackle that, we're going to bring you best bets around the NBA, top DFS plays on the ice, monthly MLB specials to discuss because opening day is officially just 1 week away.
But first, how sweet it is to be loved by you, by you. Oh yeah, baby! The Sweet 16. DraftKings contributor Julian Edlow, DK Nation's Chinmay Vaidya in the house. Take us through best bets. Which bets they love on the DK Sportsbook tonight, because we got four, count them up, four Sweet 16 games going down. First one of the evening here, Jules, coming from the East region, my guy. Michigan State squaring off against Kansas State. What is your play in this one, dude?
Yeah, not a game that I've bet yet or know if I will come around on betting. I would play at K-State. Michigan State getting a lot of love here, and the biggest mover on the board. They opened up an underdog, got bet to a favorite. People betting Izzo in March. I get that. They're coming off the more impressive victory out of either of these two teams, taking down a 2 seed in Marquette. But maybe not the most surprising thing in the world with Marquette. Generally, these teams that get ranked a 1 or a 2 seed in March Madness that began the season unranked outside of the top 25 do not fare well in the tournament. The two teams that fit that this year, Purdue and Marquette. And how did they do? So really, K-State, if you want to go back to what these teams were supposed to be, Kentucky was a top 5, top 10 team to open up the season. A more impressive win for K-State there, who was an underdog as the higher seeded team in that game. Now the underdog as the higher seeded team again. They're getting no love as the team that was picked to finish last in the Big 12. I like the vibes from that team. I like their two best players, Keontae Johnson, Marquise Noel a lot. Noel, New York City point guard, playing at MSG. Fading Izzo in March generally doesn't go well, but I do think this time around, K-State's just the better team here, and we're getting a plus price tag on that money line, so that would be my lean.
All right, yeah, and Chinmay, Kansas State is the most bet money line here since Sunday night and the conclusion of the second round.
I agree mostly with what Julian said. I think K-State has the two best players on the floor, but Michigan State might have the best overall team. Or the better overall team in this matchup. So it's a very tough one. And obviously Tom Izzo in March has done it so many times that it's very hard to bet against him. I don't know that I would have a bet in this. Maybe the under on the total. I could see possibly being a low scoring game. Michigan State tries to, slow things down, limit the number of possessions that K-State has. I could see the under being in play. But as far as a game result, I think it's going to be tough. It's going to come down to the last few possessions. And K-State does have a pretty veteran group as well. And they have arguably the two best players on the floor, but Michigan State might be playing the best team basketball at the right time. So I think the under might be the move for me, but other than that, I'm staying away from this one.
All right, fellas, next we have our first matchup from the West. Number 8, Arkansas taking on number 4, UConn. Chinmay, how are you approaching this one? Allegedly, UConn had to change hotels. Their hotel was not in good condition.
Is that right? Like bed bugs? What are we talking about?
They found dirt and vomit in their rooms.
Oh.
So they moved hotels.
Someone had a good time the night before.
They moved hotels.
I sent them an apology letter about that.
Yeah, Julian.
The maids were supposed to clean all that up.
That was, well, they did not get there in time. Chinmay, most bet tournament champion winner is UConn plus 900.
Yeah, in one of the few brackets that have actually had this correct, I did have Arkansas going to the Elite Eight, so I'm going to stick with the Razorbacks here, and I'm going to take them to win this game against UConn. Look, Arkansas played extremely well against Kansas on the defensive end, and their two NBA prospects, Nick Smith and Anthony Black, basically didn't do anything in that game. I don't think those guys will stay silent once again. I like Arkansas to keep this thing rolling against a very good UConn team. A lot of UConn fans like this group for good reason, too. It's a veteran group. They have plenty of talent, but I think Arkansas gets the job done here and makes it to the Elite Eight.
Julian, the second most bet spread is UConn minus 3.5, and the third most bet money line is UConn. So are you bucking the trend and rolling with Chinmay on this?
I went with Arkansas with the points and on the money line on Saturday against Kansas. I liked that matchup for them. I think this is a more difficult matchup for them. And maybe Anthony Black and Nick Smith, big athletic guards that are going to the NBA, have better games against maybe a smaller UConn backcourt. I could potentially see that. But the interior and the rest of this defense for UConn is much more physical than Kansas is. And I think that's where they ultimately have trouble and fall short in this game. I like both of these teams a lot. I've bet them a lot in this tournament. I've bet them a lot throughout the course of the season. So one way or another, I'm going to be picking against a team that I love. Arkansas has the coaching advantage with Musselman. He has these guys going. He's going to have a good game plan. What turns it for me is Arkansas is not a very good shooting team, and they just skated by a 1 seed winning by 1. I don't know if they can do that twice in a row. UConn is the team with the balanced KenPom rankings. They're top 15 in adjusted offensive and defensive efficiency. Arkansas's got a solid defense. They're way down there on offense, at least by Sweet 16 standards. So I think that it comes into play here. UConn ultimately hits more shots. I will say I laid 3.5 here. Once it gets to 4.5, you're looking at having to win this game by 5 or more. Now you're looking at, if this is a 7-point game late, a late 3 to get it to 4, and you can't even win. At this point, if you like UConn or Texas, who plays on Friday night, I would moneyline parlay them with Creighton. And I know we're leaking into Friday here, but Princeton, that Cinderella story is over. They caught a couple of bad teams playing poorly at the right time. I don't think that's going to happen with a well-rounded, well-coached Creighton team. So I think that the Creighton money line is the piece that gets these kind of 4-5-point favorites down to a reasonable price, and you don't have to sweat those points.
Jules, 9 o'clock Eastern time in the Garden. We have the Lane Kiffin Bowl here. It's FAU facing Tennessee. By the way, the SEC tied with the Big East for most teams still remaining in this tournament at 3. Who do you have advancing to the Elite 8, dude?
Yeah, again, I haven't bet this one. FAU's getting some respect here. I would lean to Tennessee. This game for me is the game of the night for in-game playing. I want to live bet this game if I'm going to play it. I want to see how it goes because these two teams have two completely different styles. Tennessee has size. They slow the game down. We saw them get really physical with Duke. FAU is a different team than Duke. They're probably going to try and not allow this to get physical. They play small, they get up and down, and they run. So which way does this game go? I want to watch the game, keep an eye on that, and once we see kind of the pace and the style, if it's up and down, not very physical, maybe I'll look at FAU. If Tennessee is mucking it up and putting guys on the floor, it's probably going to go their way. So I'll look to go in-game here if I get involved at all.
All right, Chinmay, as Memphis and Fairleigh Dickinson have found out here, too. There's a reason Florida Atlantic went, 31-3 before the NCAA tournament?
It was very interesting when the brackets did come out, how all the analysts were talking about Purdue possibly getting shocked by Memphis in that second round game. And nobody was looking at FAU, who had won 30 games in the regular season. And, regardless of what conference you play in, that is very hard to do, to win 30 plus games, regardless of the opponents that you're facing. That is not an easy task. And FAU did that. This is a well-coached team, a team that, as Jules mentioned, runs up and down the floor. And I know that, they snuck by Memphis on a buzzer beater, but now they've got things rolling. They got a soft matchup with FDU in the second round. Tennessee has been inconsistent this season. There's a reason that a lot of people were fading Tennessee, even in that first round game against Louisiana. I was one of them. The Vols have just not been a consistent group. I think that Tennessee could ultimately win this game, but I would go with FAU plus 5.5. I think that's my play in this game. I just don't trust Tennessee, even though they have come through in 2 games. They've just been too inconsistent for me to back going forward. I'll take the team that won 30 plus games.
Lastly, we have West Coast action between number 3 Gonzaga and number 2 UCLA. Probably the best game of the night.
Yeah.
How are you betting this one, Chinmay? Bruins have a lot of question marks on their roster. Could be plagued by some injury here.
Another matchup that I have successfully predicted in the bracket, one of the few that I've successfully predicted in the bracket. If you just took my West region and made that the bracket challenge, I think I'd be in a good spot. But I think Gonzaga gets it done here. It's expected to be a close game. UCLA dealing with some injuries. We don't know the exact status of those players. Mick Cronin just said they're day to day. I expect Bona to suit up, but who knows exactly how healthy they'll be. And Drew Timme is playing at a level that we haven't really seen before. And that's saying something for a guy who leads Gonzaga in all-time points, I believe, career points. So I think Gonzaga gets it done here. There's just enough around Timme to take the Bulldogs here. I think it'll be a close game, but give me Drew Timme to get the job done against UCLA tonight.
Jules, you rolling with the Zags too?
UCLA, play of the night for
Woo!
me. I like them in this spot. This is going to be an awesome game. Two West Coast teams playing in Vegas in the Sweet 16. Awesome atmosphere. Both will have significant support in the crowd. I think I'm taking, Chinmay's narrative of UCLA being banged up and flipping it on its head. I think that's why a lot of people are liking the Zags, and I think that UCLA is going to be just fine. UCLA was dinged up going into that Pac-12 title game against Arizona, and I know Arizona is not, high on people's lists right now when you lose to Princeton, but they are a similar comparison by the numbers to Gonzaga, a high-paced offensive team that ranks a little lower on defense. And UCLA lost that game by 2 in the Pac-12 championship. Arizona needed to hit a game-winning 3. And I was on Arizona in that game, so I was fine with the result. But they showed me that they can keep that low scoring. I think it was 58-56, which is the way UCLA wants to play. So, again, part of the reason I'm taking UConn, balance. UCLA grades out as a top 25 offensive team, second in defensive efficiency. I think that they will find a way to limit Gonzaga in a round. Gonzaga always goes to the Sweet 16. They don't do much from there. This is where the pressure kind of caves in on them. I think that Jaquez can match Timme, and you're getting a lot of production. Jalen Clark, one of the best players in the country, he's out for UCLA. You're getting a lot of production from Amari Bailey, one of the best freshmen in the country, who's putting up some good numbers. I think Bona plays. I think Singleton plays. What we get from them, TBD. But if they can give something, I like UCLA in this game, ultimately.
All right, Jules, before you guys take off, we ripped through the 8 teams playing today. You've even given us a little taste of tomorrow's action. Which futures are you on right now to make the Final Four or win the whole damn thing? Because the most bet tournament champion winner on the DK Sportsbook right now, again, since the second round concluded on Sunday night, UConn at plus 900, then Bama at plus 340, then Kansas State at plus 3,500.
I think that the winner of it all is coming from the right side of the bracket. The winner of a Houston-Texas game, the winner of a UCLA-UConn game. I think the right side of the bracket ultimately wins. That said, I think the best available future is Alabama plus 150 to reach the title game. They don't have the competition on their side. I respect Creighton. I love Creighton. I have a 42-1 ticket on Creighton, so they can go ahead and prove me wrong and upset Bama in that game that we hopefully get if they want to. But Alabama on that side, a San Diego State, Creighton, and then what? Tennessee, Michigan State, K-State type of game. I think Alabama plus 150 to reach that championship game. Or if you want to go, I think 140 just to make the Final Four. I'm good with any of those, and I think Alabama ultimately falls short in the big game.
Chimay, before the Sweet 16 tips off tonight, give us a future you like on the DK Sportsbook.
There's several good options here. I think Alabama to reach the title game is a great one. Alabama to win it all is coming in at plus 350 or something, 340, I think, on the DK Sportsbook. That's a good one. Just given the competition that they could have if all these teams beat up on each other. I also like either Michigan State or K-State to reach the Final Four from that region. Both those teams are behind Tennessee at the moment, but if you take one of those, you'll have a shot there because someone's going to win that matchup tonight. And then I also like Gonzaga coming out of the West. That's coming in at plus 240. I have Gonzaga in the Final Four this year. And if they're coming in behind UConn and UCLA, I think I'll put something on that.
All right, good stuff, fellas. Thank you. Johnny Avello took us behind the book and took a look at which regional winners would cost the book the most in the futures market on Unreasonable Odds.
Unreasonable Odds podcast.
Unreasonable Odds with Julian Edlow.
You have a podcast.
By the way, Tennessee beating Duke. That was the largest win and handle of any game we've booked so far. And then Michigan State beating Marquette. And those were outstanding for us.
All right. Well, we tried to Matt Kalish, one of the co-founders of DraftKings Sportsbook, of DraftKings, at our VIP launch party at Banners in Boston on Saturday, tried to give that away. He said Duke's a trap. Take Tennessee with the points. He gave that out as his bet on VSiN. I guess the DraftKings Sportsbook bettors weren't listening. The book cleans up on the Duke bets coming in. How about the futures market, Johnny? What was costly for the book, or what was costly for the public, and some of the futures that have paid out already, whether it be like Sweet 16s or teams that got knocked out to win it all?
No, I could tell you some of the regions that will be costly if they get there. Not so much so far.
Okay.
Alabama in the South, they took about 60% of the handle. Houston and Texas, both in the Midwest, were bet, so they appear to be in good shape there. Zags in the West, Zags were a decent price, 4.5 to 1 or so. And as far as the East is concerned, we're okay there. So that's 1 out of 4. We're okay in shape.
Yes, the East not quite holding true to form in terms of that seeding.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Sweat. It is time to put this show on ice because we have a massive 11-game NHL slate coming our way this evening. Here to help us make sense of it, NHL.com's Pete Jensen, back from paternity leave.
Yeah, baby!
Congratulations. Like Emerson said, you look extremely well rested, and AJ Schultz is here as well. So, Pete, we'll give you the honor of starting. Who are you slotting into your lineup at center?
So I'll ride the hot hand with Wyatt Johnston. He's a rookie-eligible player this year, leads rookies in goals in a secondary role, and I'm really excited to see what he could do in the long term in fantasy keeper leagues and stuff like that. You already know Dallas has that dynamite young core with Ottinger and Jason Robertson, Rupe Hintz, Heiskanen, but add Johnston to the mix. He has had an outstanding month of March and is still a value pick in DFS at $3,900. I also like Michael Backlund from the Calgary Flames. So many disappointments right on Calgary with guys like Huberdeau, Nazem Kadri, Elias Lindholm, all falling short of fantasy offensive expectations. But Backlund leads them in shots on goal, and he's been a menace no matter where he plays in the lineup. So those are my 2 centers for tonight.
All right, AJ, what's up? What's the game plan here? Do you pay up at center?
Well, Pete went young. I'm going to go old and go with Patrice Bergeron here. Just 6,600 tonight. A little more expensive than some of Pete's guys, but well off the top of the board here. You got the Bruins at home facing the Habs, so it's a huge matchup for them. Bergeron, for his part, 2 goals, 4 assists in his last 3 contests. So you've got a red-hot player in a marquee matchup here. And then, Bergeron's numbers, because of that matchup, might be pretty high in terms of drafted percentage here. So one alternative I'll give it would be right about in the same price range. JT Miller, 6,400, 13 points in his last 7 games. And he's also going to be playing at home against an underdog team, the San Jose Sharks. So both these guys, really good matchups tonight. Drafted percentage could be a little high on both, especially Bergeron, but I think they're both worth consideration.
Well, AJ, what's the move on the wing here? So David Pastrnak, top of this list. We know how good the Bruins have been the last 10, 7-3. They've opened a 20-point lead on their nearest pursuers there in the Atlantic Division. What do you want to do?
I'm going to look a little further down the price range here, and I'm going to target TJ Oshie at 5K. It's another home team with a heavy advantage against a weaker opponent as they go up against the Chicago Blackhawks. Oshie, 3 goals, 4 assists in his last 7 contests. And he's seeing opportunities with the man advantage. He's got 1 goal in that role to show for it. And oh, by the way, they're going to get John Carlson back tonight, which is only going to make that top power play unit even better. I think Oshie is a low price way to get a share of that Caps #1 power play unit.
Okay, talk to me here, Pete. How much money do you want to spend on the wing tonight?
I'll spend up for Nikita Kucherov. It's a great matchup against Ottawa, who's had leaky goaltending this season with a bunch of injuries at that position. So Kucherov's as good as ever, really. He had just solidified his 3rd career 100-point season. He's playing with Braden Point, trusted sidekick, and also Brandon Hagel. I don't think many people have talked enough about this guy who's been the third wheel on that unit for most of the season. He's closing in on 60 points. That guy wasn't even fantasy relevant last year when he got traded from Chicago to Tampa Bay. It's amazing what Tampa Bay just continues to do with whichever players they get and tapping into their upside continuously. So, yeah, I like Kucherov for only 8K and building the rest of the lineup around him. Tampa Bay is a relatively sure thing, and Kucherov has 3 points in one game against Ottawa this season.
All right, Pete, take us to the blue line. Who do you want to roster on your defensive position?
So I have a couple guys here in my mock lineup. Brady Shea, I wanted to mention, is quietly tied for 5th among NHL defensemen in goals this season with 15. So the Hurricanes are loaded on the back end. You know, of course, they have maybe some offensive-minded guys ahead of him in the pecking order some nights with Brent Burns and Shane Goss to spare. But I really like Shea, regardless of placement and usage, to deliver a goal potentially like he has for most of the season. And also Alex Pietrangelo, I have. The Vegas Golden Knights are playing really well these days, and Pietrangelo is having a great season despite missing some time because of injury. He's borderline top 15 at the position in points per game this season. And yeah, just Vegas seems to be clicking at the right time of year right now.
All right, AJ, what do you think? Who are you rolling with?
I'll go back to the Bruins here. Hampus Lindholm comes in at just 5,200, and he's been taking the bulk of the minutes with the #1 power play unit. 6 points in his last 5 contests, including a pair of power play assists. And again, this is a key matchup, I think, to target tonight as Boston goes up against Montreal. Hampus Lindholm, key to success with the man advantage right now.
AJ, your DFS stack du jour. Which team are you looking at? Which guys you putting in the lineup?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I've been high on Boston today. I've mentioned both Vancouver and Washington, the fact that they're at home against weaker opponents. But one sleeper option maybe to target tonight would be the Kraken on the road against the Predators. Nashville has not been overwhelmingly better at home, not like they were a couple of years ago where pretty much anybody going into Bridgestone Arena would lose. But the Kraken have the 3rd most wins this season on the road, behind only Boston and New Jersey. So this is a very good road team. I think Jared McCann is an option. Matty Beniers, of course, is always worth consideration. Vince Dunn as well. So I think you have several options you could use in what will be probably an underutilized stack tonight.
Pete, which team are you stacking tonight?
Well, I mentioned a Vegas guy in Pietrangelo, but there are so many different ways to tap into this team. They got 4 different guys that are a point per game or better in the month of March. They got Eichel, Pietrangelo, Jonathan Marchessault, and the guy I like the best for the price point is Riley Smith, 9-game point streak, $4,600. And he brings some exposure to Eichel. He's really stepped up in the absence of Mark Stone, who's been out for a while with back surgery. And then you could also tap in if you want to stack maybe with the goaltender who has a great chance at a win, either Logan Thompson or Jonathan Quick, who's been a big surprise since the trade to the Golden Knights. And then there's also a couple of these like middle of the road forwards that have been productive lately, right? There's like Ivan Barbashev and Pavel Dorofeyev. Like, get to know those names. And Vegas seems to be maybe not a juggernaut like they were a couple of years ago, but definitely a sneaky team to consider Stanley Cup futures wise out west.
All right, Pete, who's putting one in the net tonight?
I will go with Andrei Kuzmenko to echo what what was said earlier in the show. Of course, I think like the exposure to either JT Miller or Elias Pettersson, 21 goals in 35 home games this season. It's amazing what a home run this guy has been for the Canucks, despite the fact that things have gone off the rails a little bit this season for Vancouver at different points. I like what they're charging up with now. Thatcher Demko's playing well in the net, has given that team confidence, and Kuzmenko has been quietly one of the breakout players in the entire NHL this season with 61 points in 69 games.
AJ, what do you think? Who's putting one in net tonight?
Yeah, I'm with Pete. Same team, different player. I'm going to go with JT Miller tonight for the Canucks. He's actually tied with Nathan McKinnon and Leon Draisaitl for the 3rd most goals in the month of March. Again, it's a great home matchup so for me, it has to be Miller. I'll throw in a guy Pete mentioned earlier as my honorable mention here, Wyatt Johnson for the Stars. Goals in 5 straight games, facing a Penguins team that's on the second of a road back-to-back. We've talked about blue line and goaltender issues there, so I think it's a good opportunity for Johnson to make it 6 in a row.
Gentlemen, you both were tremendous. Pete, good to see your face again. AJ, always great to see yours as well. NBA Fast Break is next, so top DFS and sportsbook plays around the association. Right after the Old Man and 3 discusses the struggles of the Portland Trailblazers, although they won last night and snapped a 6-game losing streak. So, yeah, they have been struggling.
The Blazers, Tommy, they started the season very well. They were in first place, 12, 13 games in. A few injuries, including injuries to Dame, but they're looking like they won't be a playoff team, which is a real shame because I would love to see Damian Lillard in the playoffs. According to DraftKings Sportsbook, they opened at plus 195 to make the playoffs. One of the reasons is they had Jeremy Grant, Josh Hart, Shaden Sharp, the draft pick. So they kind of had a roster that you felt like around Dame could really vault them into contention for a playoff spot. And for much of the season, they've been in that 7 to 10 range, but now they're currently sitting 13th. They're 31-37. They're 4 games back of the 6th seed and 2 games back in the loss column of the 10 seed. But given how the Lakers have been playing, OKC and Utah are not going away. It's not looking good for them. They're right now on DraftKings. They're minus 1,400 not make the playoffs. And I just this is a team that I would like to see. I love watching Damian Lillard in the playoffs, dissecting defenses, dissecting coverages. We should also mention Anthony Simons, who has had a good season and another young player that fits with Dame. One thing I would just make a note of, it is interesting. This is the first, because Dame was hurt last year towards the end of the season and CJ got traded at the deadline. This is really Dame's first season playing without CJ. And I think that based on his comments to us, I think that can account a little bit for some of his aggressiveness and some of his scoring output.
So they're, as of today, they're 8th in offense, 27th in defense, 24th in net rating. Why is this defense so bad? I don't think anyone thought this was a top 5 defense going into the season, but why are they so bad?
It's interesting because I think a lot of defenses are really bad. Like, I mean, even we talked about this way earlier in the season, but it is interesting to sort of note how defensive ratings have just completely gone through the roof relative to 5 years ago, 10 years ago, certainly 15 years ago, 16 years ago, 17 years ago when I first came into the NBA. And the spacing is really hard. I think some of it with Portland has been a little continuity issue. When you're playing young players and they have we should mention Watford too, of course. They're playing young players. I think it's hard to figure out.
All right, just 4 games around the association tonight, baby. And we got 3 dudes here to break it down from a DFS or sportsbook perspective. It's totally up to them. DraftKings contributors Gary and Thorne, Jeff Pratt, RotoWire's Nick Whalen. I see the Clippers are on the slate tonight here, guys. And you know who the Clippers won't have for the next 2 to 3 weeks? That's Paul George. So all season long here, Gary Bear, the Clippers have tried to manage the roster in a way that doesn't put too much of a burden on their stars. But right, load management can't prevent every injury. How much trouble are the Clippers in? Currently the 5th seed in the West without Paul George.
They're 6-11 this season without him. So
yeah, it's concerning. Look, the West is packed tight. We've been talking about it for weeks now, and this isn't a situation where the Clippers have a lot of room and cushion to play with. I mean, I know the reports when they came out yesterday, there was sort of this resounding, he might not be available for the rest of the regular season, but he might be available for the postseason. And it's like, well, that's pretty confident there. The Clippers are going to make the postseason, because that's not a guarantee at this point, just with how competitive the Western Conference has been this season. I think they'll end up being fine, but when you look at how they're currently constructed and what they gave away at the trade deadline, you know, they don't have Norman Powell. They don't have Paul George. Right now they're playing Kawhi Leonard like 39 minutes a game, which I don't think is a scenario we ever saw coming with Kawhi in Los Angeles, aside from maybe the playoffs. So it's really come down to, again, this sort of situation where you're staring at this roster and going, oh God, like they need Russell Westbrook to play well. And as we've said time and time on this show, if that's a question or if that's a need that your team has in the year 2023, you're not in a very good place as a franchise.
Nick, what's the margin of error for LA without Paul George?
It's very, very thin, and Garion hit on exactly the point that I would bring up, and that's that they have Russell Westbrook on this roster, and they're now going to have to ask Russell Westbrook to do things that he should not have to do in the year of our Lord 2023. That's a bad recipe for the LA Clippers. And if you look at the schedule, guys, they only have one more Eastern Conference opponent this season. So almost all of their games are against teams with which they're jockeying for position in the Western Conference. They're ultra meaningful, beginning with tonight against the Thunder, a team they just lost to 2 days ago. They play the Pelicans twice in the next week and a half. They have 2 more against the Grizzlies back-to-back. Next week, they play the Lakers, they play the Blazers, they play the Suns. Like, this is not an easy schedule. There are not a lot of games that you can afford to lose, and there are not a lot of gimmies left for the Clippers.
Jeff, so how about this stat? Clippers have outscored opponents by nearly 9 points per 100 possessions when George and Kawhi Leonard play together this season. That is an elite rate and by far the best of any duo on the team. There is no way that this team can win the West without Paul George and Kawhi Leonard together playing on the floor.
Absolutely not. There's just, both these guys have hit on it. There is no way they can do it. They were already fighting an uphill battle with both of them on the floor because of how inconsistent this team had been so far this year. And I hate to be the pessimist. I don't want to be the one sounding the alarms for Clippers fans out here, but we saw this type of injury with Danilo Gallinari in the preseason, and there is more imaging to come here. I'm just going to say that right now. Paul George is not out of the woods yet. We saw that with these knee injuries, sometimes it takes a while for the swelling to go down to reveal these more severe injuries. So there is still a chance that Paul George could be dealing with an ACL tear, an MCL tear, something significant like that. And I hate to, be the bummer in the room here, but people who are saying, hey, there's a chance he comes back for the postseason, I'd say there's more of a chance that he has suffered a very severe injury here. So anyone expecting him to come back, I think that's just a pipe dream at this point.
All right, let's jump into tonight's 4-game NBA slate. So we're going to roll through. You're going to give your favorite DFS or sportsbook play, whichever you desire. Gary, and we're starting with the New York Knicks at the Orlando Magic. What's your play in this one?
Yeah, it's a play that I couldn't foresee myself making 2 weeks ago, let alone 2 months ago. But I think I like the over tonight in this game. It's at 228, which is relatively high. I was hoping to get this maybe around 225, 226. But when you look at the way these two teams have been playing so far this month, the over's been hitting quite a bit, specifically for Orlando. They are 7-2 to the over in their last 9 games. And a big reason for that is, one, they've seen an uptick in their offensive efficiency and a drastic downtick in their defensive efficiency. but also they're 6th in pace in the month of March. They're playing a much more up-tempo game. Markel Fultz is really the fulcrum of that style of play right now for them, as Jeff pointed out in his lovely Twitter breakdown yesterday. Everyone should go check that out.
Thank you.
And the Knicks, like, we all thought the Knicks were this, slow-paced, defensive, very like 90s style Knicks team, because they were for the first 3 quarters of the season. And then suddenly in March, they've got the 4th best offensive rating in the league and the 23rd defensive rating. I mean, Mitchell Robinson came back, and it really hasn't impacted their defense all that much, or at least as much as we thought it would. So at this point, with the way these two teams are playing, I'll just take the over.
All right, Jeff, what do you think?
Wow,
you
Jeff.
Go DFS or betting for your play?
I'm going to go with betting. I'm looking at player props pretty much all across the board here. And Emerson Guerin, I'm actually not focusing on Markel Fultz today. I think his lines are a little high. I would have liked his points and assists prop. It's sitting at 22.5, I believe. He's hit 22 in back-to-back games. So I think if you can take an alternate line there, it's a little safer. And I am going to stick with one of his Magic teammates. I was actually interested in Jalen Brunson's assists. I was hoping that line was going to be at 5.5 instead of 6.5. I'm not going all the way up to 6.5, so I would take an alternate there as well. But I'm going to pivot to Franz Wagner, and I think there's a slight edge here with his points and rebounds prop at over 22.5. He's almost hit this number with points alone in 3 straight games. He's gone over the combined total in 8 of his last 9 matchups. He's playing a ton of minutes right now. His usage rate is significantly up. This is just a good opportunity for him to stay hot.
All right, where are we going, Waylon?
I'm going to take the Knicks tonight. This line feels a little bit low. I know it's already moved from 3 to 3.5 just in the last few minutes, but they are the best road cover team in the NBA this season. They're 24-13 ATS on the road, and they're 8-2 ATS as a road favorite. So a lot of indicators here, favoring the New York Knicks, although the Orlando Magic have a better net rating than the New York Knicks over the last 10 games. So that there's really not as much of a separation between these teams of late. As the standings might indicate. Nice win over Washington for the Magic earlier this week. But I still trust the Knicks here. Julius Randle playing well. Jalen Brunson back in action. And if you're looking for a DFS play from this game, Cole Anthony for the Orlando Magic, 5,600, playing well off the bench.
All right, Jeff, Cleveland Cavaliers and Brooklyn Nets. Cavs 7-3 in their last 10. You got the Nets on a skid, 0-4 in their last 4, and that's talking straight up and against the spread. What's the play here?
Again, another player prop, and I wanted to take Jalen Brunson's assists in the last game. I am going to take Spencer Dinwiddie's assists this time over 8.5. And if you want to bump this all the way up to plus money, I like the alternate 10-plus assist line at plus 135 too. And I have to say, I did not see this level of playmaking coming from Spencer Dinwiddie. I've watched this guy play for the last few years pretty consistently, and while he always puts up solid numbers, he always seems like a score-first guard, at least when you watch him play. He takes a lot of shots, so seeing him average over 8 assists per game with the Nets this season is pretty crazy, but it's also pretty cool to see him adapt to a new situation so fluidly. It feels like he's had to do that quite a bit over the last few seasons. He's racked up double-digit assists in 5 of his last 6 games. The Nets and Cavs played just 2 days ago. He finished with 11. I talked about round 1 of this matchup in studio Tuesday, and it's really a disaster from a DFS perspective. So I'm sticking on the sportsbook side and rolling with Spencer Dinwiddie.
Nick, what's the play here, dude? Sportsbook DFS?
Well, Jeff's right that this is not a super advantageous spot for DFS. 2 healthy teams, 2 teams that are playing well on defense. They're number 1 and number 2 in defensive rating over the last 10 games. They also play relatively slowly, especially the Cavs. But I'm going to go with Jared Allen, who I think we're getting at a slight discount. He just came back from an eye injury earlier this week, showed no signs of rust in his last game, played 35 minutes against these very Nets, put up 36 DraftKings points. And he has at least 36 DraftKings points in each of his last 3 games, dating back to pre-injury. So I think he's a good value tonight. I think this Nets team, they've had a great year out of Nicholas Claxton. They have no other big man depth whatsoever. You're getting into guys like Day'Ron Sharpe beyond that. And, if Nick Claxton, have to spend time defending Evan Mobley, I think this frees up Jared Allen for a big night.
All right, Garion.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the sportsbook and just take the Cavs -4. We saw them cover this line at home a couple nights ago. And look, the Cavaliers, They do have a little like Nuggets Warriors vibe this season, where they're much better in Cleveland than they are on the road. They're actually only 17-20 straight up on the road so far this season, but they've been exceptional so far in March. They have the second best net rating in the NBA in that span of time, trailing only the Philadelphia 76ers. The Nets are in a little bit of a free fall right now. They're 0-4 ATS their last 4 games. They've also just historically been a team that really does struggle to cover at home. They've actually only covered 22 of their last 69 home games. That's a trend that goes back into last season, so take it with a grain of salt if you want to. But in general, the Nets don't have much of a home court advantage, I think is the point I'm trying to make here. So I think that somewhat lessens my worry about Cleveland and their struggles on the road so far this season. I just don't know how the Nets are going to score against this Cavaliers defense. They had 109 points on Tuesday. I think that's another scenario we see tonight where they struggle to get to 110. And in the current version of the NBA, if you're holding your opponent to below 110 points, you're probably going to win.
All right, Hornets at Pelicans. Pelicans trying to work their way into the Western Conference play-in tournament. Nick, where are you going in this one?
I think the Hornets could cover 9 points tonight against the New Orleans Pelicans. I like the Pelicans to win this game. They certainly have more at stake at this point in the year. They're pushing for a play-in spot, but this Charlotte team has played twice in the last 7 days. They haven't played since Monday. And unlike some of the other, truly bad teams in the league, they have real pieces. Kelly Oubre, Gordon Hayward, Terry Rozier, these are real, legit NBA players. So I don't know if they're quite as bad as their record would indicate. And more importantly, the Hornets are essentially locked into the 4th worst record. They'll have a hard time getting into that bottom 3. There's a huge gap between them and the other teams in the mix below them. So you're not really worried about motivation here. They're just going to play out the string over these last 10 games, get the 4th best odds, and hopefully move up. So I like the Hornets to keep this one relatively close. And then on the DFS side, if you're looking for a cheap play, Nick Richards, center, he started the last 5 games with Mark Williams, injured at 14 and 17 with 2 blocks in just 26 minutes on Monday against Indiana. Fouls have been an issue for him. He does pick up fouls early in games, but if he can stay out of foul trouble, I think he'll be one of the better values on the board.
All right, running out of time here, so speed it up, Garion. Where are you going?
Yeah, Nick and I, a lot of similar thoughts here, so I'll just go to the under. These two teams, both top 10 in defensive rating and bottom 10 in offensive rating so far in March. The Hornets actually dead last in offensive rating in the month of March. They have hit the under in 19 of their last 26 games. I just think both teams trend towards the under here. They both struggle to score, so under 225.5.
All right, Jeff, where are you going?
I'm going with Trey Murphy in a player prop. I think he's one of the most underrated players in the NBA at this point. And he's a guy who will never win most improved player because that award goes to superstars who put up ridiculous numbers. But I'd like to give him props because he's having a fantastic season. His points are way up. His 3-point shooting's way up. His minutes are way up. He's really earned a spot in this Pelicans rotation. The prop I'm looking at with him tonight is over 2.5 threes, which is currently at minus 140. I think he's hit that total in 9 of his last 10 games. He's taking a ton of them on a nightly basis. He's shooting just under 40% from behind the arc, so he should keep that rolling tonight.
Gary and the pleasantly surprising Thunder and the Paul George-less Clippers.
Yeah, let's just keep this one simple. Kawhi's less than 10K. As I mentioned earlier, he's basically playing 39 minutes a game. Now that there's no Paul George, I assume we see his usage rate tick up well above 30%. This should be an up-tempo matchup against a Thunder team that have consistently been in the top 3 in the NBA in pace so far this season. So for the next 2-3 weeks, if Kawhi's less than 10K, and honestly, this might be the last chance we get with him at less than 10K, just take that opportunity.
Jeff?
I think I'm rolling with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander just to score 30-plus points on an alternate line. I watched the majority of that Thunder-Clippers game on Tuesday. I swear it was one of the ugliest games I've seen Shai play in his career. He was missing layups, making bad decisions. It was just a mess all around. But then you look at the stat sheet, and he finished with 31 points on 12 of 25 shooting. So it seems like he can just sleepwalk through these games at this point. There's no one on the Thunder who is really contesting him for shots. And what's even more impressive is he's doing this without taking threes. The guy doesn't take a lot of threes, and when he does, he doesn't shoot them at a high percentage. So the Thunder have a lot to play for. He's going to see a lot of minutes, get his full workload. He should score 30.
Nick, bring us home.
Thunder are winning this game outright. I like them to cover 4. I like them to win. I don't know why they would be scared of the Clippers team that they just beat a couple of days ago, and now you take Paul George out of the equation. For a lot of this season, we were questioning the motivation with the Thunder. Do they want to win games? Do they want to help their draft slot? At this point, I have no more questions. I mean, if they win this game, they'll pull within a half game of the Clippers and a half game of the 5 seed in the Western Conference. I mean, we're talking above the play-in at this point. And I know the Clippers are deep. They have some options to replace PG, but that is a huge, huge loss. I mean, you're losing like 23, 6-6 every single night. I think there's going to be an adjustment period. OKC, 19-8-3 ATS as a road dog. This season, they're 20-13-2 ATS after a win. I like the Thunder to keep this going.
All right, good stuff, guys. We're going to keep rolling here on the sweat. But first, I mean, that last at-bat of the WBC between Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani.
Special.
It's going to go down in history.
Makes me hot and bothered.
In terms of like Shohei measuring against Trout and whether we believe that's part of the motivation, like he pumped 2 100-plus fastballs, one at the knees and one like right down Trout's gut, like the chest area, and obviously pumped him right by him. And that to me was as bad or more than the strike him out, where you're just like, and I think they commented on the broadcast, like Trout nodded at the first one, I think. And like that
he threw
one,
him 100 miles an hour for strike 2 right down the plate. Trout swung through it, and he was like, okay, all right.
He swung and missed both times, had no chance. And that's why Smoltzy, and I said the exact same thing that Smoltzy said on TV. I said, you throw him another one. Because I was, like, hey, I want to, your best, my best. I wanted Shohei to just step back and gather himself and then just in motion with his glove. Here it comes.
Yeah. I think
it comes.
Go. It's not the perfect comparison, but I was having major flashbacks to Eric Gagne versus Bonds. Yeah. When it's just like the best in the world versus the best in the world at that time. And that's basically what we saw. So I was watching on, I was streaming it. So I was on a little bit of a delay. So I would get I have my push notifications for all like the big national writers for that at bat. The fact that we even got it, 3-2, 9th inning, 2 outs, Trout, Ohtani, championship game. The fact that we got that, I was like, all right, I don't care if I don't get the clip out in first or in time. I flipped my phone upside down, didn't want to anything to spoil it, and I just sat there and I watched the entire at bat with a eating grin on my face. I was just smiling watching the entire at bat. I was so fucking happy. But to Joey's point earlier about you find yourself rooting for Shohei in that specific at bat, it's not like you're rooting against the United States. You're not rooting against Mike Trout. At your core, if you're a diehard baseball fan, if you're booking this like Vince McMahon, who has to go over in that spot? If that's the WrestleMania main event, and you've been building up your star, and building him up, and now he's got John Cena, he's got the Undertaker at WrestleMania, and this is the guy that you're telling all the fans, this is the guy, he's the face, he has to go over at WrestleMania. I'm not rooting against the United States. I'm rooting for baseball. I was rooting for Shohei Ohtani to strike out Mike Trout in that at bat, and that's exactly what happened. That's the result that baseball needed. Was that
definitely.
All right, Emerson, you just want to stare at them?
We are
All
right,
back,
and
we are back here on the sweat. Jesse and Emerson here with our lovely DraftKings MLB panel.
Yes.
Steve Buchanan, RotoWire's Eric Halterman. Guys, we're going to go through and do some MLB seeing the future. So we're about 1 week away, exactly 1 week away from opening day. So these are your favorite plays for the MLB monthly specials in April, listed on the DK Sportsbook.
Before we do that, we got to get the reaction to the WBC.
Oh, yes.
And that storybook finish, Steve Buchanan. Give me one word to describe it, babe.
Oh, immaculate.
Oh, love that one.
That's a
good word, dude.
Thank you.
Eric, one word to describe it. Give it to me.
Can we just go with scripted?
Oh, no, you did not.
Not alleging anything here, but man, it was too perfect. If you were going to script it, isn't that exactly how you'd have the whole tournament finish off?
Yeah.
I mean, Bukes, the impacts of this WBC, the entire tournament, all the way down to the last at bat, I think this could be felt throughout baseball for years to come here, dude. What do you
yeah,
think?
I agree 100% too. And this is kind of what this sport has needed for a while, right? Like they got the rule changes that it's going to help. And then we have the World Baseball Classic that obviously helped too. Like, my son's not a huge baseball fan. He was watching a lot of these games because
Ew.
he was into it. And how could you not be into it? Like this was great baseball that we were seeing, especially as the tournament went on too. Like a lot of these teams were so evenly matched that like it made for compelling games. The people who don't like the World Baseball Classic, like these mad dogs that are on television saying how boring it was and how scripted it was, there's a couple of criteria that they're all hitting. One, they're extremely old. Two, they don't have any presence on Twitter, or like their profile pictures of a frame picture or like a computer monitor, something weird. Like those are the people who don't like the World Baseball Classic. People who are like with it in this world, or people who are like in tune with things, very much enjoyed the World Baseball Classic despite everything that happened. Baseball needed this. It hit an absolute home run, no pun intended, and I loved every moment of it.
I mean, if the World Baseball Classic, Eric, isn't making a positive difference like on this game, you know what will? Is Major League Baseball putting bat girls and bat boys on the hot seat.
Yeah, because Emerson really wants bat dogs.
I just want a damn
All right,
bat
you just
dog.
want bat dogs. All right, guys, interesting markets offered the monthly specials, and there's definitely value there. So let's start with the division leader by the end of the month. Which team are you going to be backing here, Eric?
The most interesting value to me looks like it's the Guardians at plus 190 to top the AL Central by the end of the month. That's barely better than a 1-in-3 chance, but they won the division last year and are projected to win it again. And their schedule in that first month is quite easy. To prepare for this segment, I looked at the schedules of every team projected to lose at least 90 games on Fangraphs. There's 6 of them. And Cleveland gets to play 4 series against those 6 teams in the first month. They get to face against the A's, the Nationals, the Tigers, and the Rockies. Those are 4 sweepable series. They could easily go, say, 10-2 across those series. I think with a schedule like that for a team that already should be the best in the division, I'm really surprised that they're just plus 190.
All right, Steve, what do you think? Which team are you backing here?
The world famous actor Jack Nicholson once said in Batman, "You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts."
Yeah.
How about we back the Orioles at 7-1 to lead the AL East after the month of April is over? You want to talk about a ridiculous schedule to start the month of April? That's exactly what the Orioles have. Look at these teams that they're facing in the month of April. They're facing the Tigers 7 times, the Athletics 4 times, the Nationals twice. That's half of their schedule in the month of April. The remaining games are up against the Red Sox, who, we're still kind of on the fence on how they're going to be. The Yankees, who are coming in a little walking wounded as it is. And then the Rangers, who I'm still pretty much out on, but they're definitely making strides. They're going to be a contender in a couple of years. The Orioles didn't make a lot of moves in this offseason. They don't need to make a lot of moves in the offseason because they are full of youth and those prospects that are ready to play at the major league level. I think we see a big upset to start the month of April. The Orioles 7-1 to lead the American League East.
All right, Bukes, what about a team you like to be leading the majors in wins by the end of April? So you have the Dodgers and the Rays sitting atop the board right now.
Yeah, you look at the Dodgers, they're the odds-on favorites here. I do like them here at 6-1. I think the Dodgers are going to be a bit of a disappointment overall on the season, but you cannot deny the schedule that they're going to endure. That's probably not the right word, but the schedule that they have in the beginning of April. They don't play a team that was above 500 until the 17th game of the season for them in the month of April. That's when they face the New York Mets. They're facing the Diamondbacks 8 times, the Chicago Cubs 6 times, the Rockies twice, the Giants 3 times, and the Pittsburgh Pirates 3 times. That's a lot of wins that they're going to rack up early in the season, especially in the month of April here. So, I don't want to take the odds on favor here because it's kind of a boring play, but a 6-1 odds, considering the schedule that they're facing here, I think the Dodgers are a pretty good play here.
Eric, who's getting off to a hot start?
Well, I do still like the Guardians here as well at plus 2,200, but of those top teams, I would prefer the Rays at plus 850. We talked about those series against the true bottom dwellers. The Rays also have 4 of their first 9 against the bottom dwellers. They get the Nationals, the Reds, the A's, and the Tigers. And they're a team that just doesn't seem likely to take games off. They're in a very tough division. They know how to eke out wins from marginal talent. That's kind of their whole brand. So I'm expecting them to try their hardest from the start. The only reason I don't entirely like them in that first month is because they won't have Tyler Glasnow early. One thing you want to think about with these props is, are teams missing key pieces? such that their April talent level isn't the same as their May through September talent level. Maybe that's a point against the Guardians. It's also a minor point against the Dodgers, who will be without Tony Gonsolin for his first few turns. But I still think I like the Rays enough out of that top tier.
All right, guys, we're like out of time, so super fast on this last one. We have individualized team win totals for the monthly tabs. So who do you like to hit their over in wins on the month, Eric?
Steve stole my thunder with the Orioles. I think that's the top one, plus 120 to go basically 15-13 this month against the schedule that he talked about. That's the best one. I think a sneaky one, maybe the Pirates plus 120 to go over 13.5. They just need to go 14-15 for the first month, and they get series against the Rockies, the Nationals, and 2 against the Reds.
Steve, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the Dodgers over 16.5 is a play to make. And how about give us some extra time next time? There's some sports on here we cover no one even cares about. So give us some extra time next time. Put us earlier in the show. That's for producer Samir.
All right. Make sure you slack them, but we are out of time. We have to go.
I will.
The show starts at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning Eastern time. We'll see everybody then.